Bruh, I went to this public lecture where Mbusiyeni did his lecture too. Bruh, this was crazy.
Viva Vitumbiko, viva! Maduro Abino! Thank you very much. Thank you, honorable members. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. Salutations indeed to my brother, my comrade, the Minister of Trade and Industry, Mr. Vitumbiko Mumba, Paramount Chiefs, Ondabezita, moderator and executive members of the Nkoma Synod, Livingstonia Synod, Plaintra Synod, Chairman of Public Affairs Committee, Chairman and executive members of the Zomba CCJP, Vice President of the Political Science Association and your executive members, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, the Registrar, the Chairperson of Council, and the entire University of Malawi management. Former Deputy Speaker of Parliament, I hope you are not going to say point of order to me at some point tonight. The leaders of different political parties that are here, the students of Malawi University, Mombasa Catholic University, Mas and Tomasi College of Education. It is my great privilege this evening to give a talk to this important gathering which seeks to inculcate the culture and do a counterculture to the prevailing politics on our continent that have largely failed to prioritize people and their needs. It is, as I imagine, axiomatic that at this stage that ours is the poorest region in the world. Africa, which is over half a century after colonial independence, remains the place of darkness. A continent made in the image of poverty, of wars, disease, unemployment, and cultural inferiority. Close to 430 million of Africa's total population lives in extreme poverty, measured by those who survive on less than $1 a day. For 500 years, since the first ships loaded with millions of chained black bodies who slaved in the Americas for the enrichment of white supremacists of European colonial expansion. For 400 years since the colonial settlements and conquerors of our lands and people by key European empires of the English, the French, the Belgians, the Portuguese, the Germans, and the Dutch. An era of colonial extraction accompanied by episodes of genocidal extinction, administrative massacres, and the systemic exclusion of the African from global cultural developments, especially modern science and industry. Racial hatred drove the European to mark our continent and its people as inferior beings that they could not participate in the universal movement of scientific and industrial thought. This, Comrade Vitumbiko, I argue, may very well be the biggest project of conquest ever unleashed on Africa, as it somehow guarantees Africa's dependency on European tutelage. The tragic fact that Africa, without Europeans, is unable to conduct its own affairs since the birth of modern capitalist development, and always already collapses into dysfunctionality, poverty, disease, war, in an endless movement of self-sabotage and self-mutilation. This ought to be the greatest assault on Africa beyond slavery, colonial conquest, and its associated massacres. The creation of a subject incapable of self-rule, of self-love, of self-control, of self-reliance, in a permanent process of permanent juniority. Tonight we must ask, how did this happen? How is it that we are a people who always fail to act in our best interest? We seem always ready to turn against ourselves. And yet, how can we explain that regardless of the poverty of this continent, its wars, its diseases, and the multiple dysfunctional states, Europeans and Americans, and in recent years, the Chinese, have not failed to get whatever minerals that they want out of our continent? Alongside this is the reality of losses caused by illicit financial flows. According to the report of the high-level panel on illicit financial flows from Africa, headed by President Mbeki, it is estimated that over $60 billion is lost every year from the continent due to transfer pricing, base erosion, profit shifting, and corruption. To understand the magnanimity of this figure, consider the GDP of Malawi in the region of about 13 to 14 billion dollars. Meaning, we are talking about 4 times the GDP of this country. Close to $60 billion every year lost to illicit financial flows. The enablers of these laws are weak governing systems as well as inaccessible budgeting information, budget processes and procedures that are often not available to the general public, including legislative bodies, weak monitoring systems in custom duties, allowing mispricing of goods and services, including movement of public funds by politicians into private tax havens in places like Dubai and London, stealing from the public purse, moving those funds in processes of illicit financial flows for personal selfish benefit. Across our continent, we still are largely in the second industrial revolution. We still need trains, electrical connectivity, water and sewer infrastructure, and an African automobile industry, an African-made car. This is all the while the world has entered full steam into the 4th industrial revolution, whose capacity to emerge depends on the third industrial revolution innovations like the internet and digital technologies. The road, rail, and airport infrastructure connectivity of our continent was always identified as a key to the collective development needed for absolute breakthrough from underdevelopment. The massive improvement in electrical connectivity, including infrastructure related to water, sanitation, education, and healthcare. The world is already moving into the dimensions of artificial intelligence, intelligent machines and programs, at the center of which lies the human replacement in the very question of development that we speak of. This world, Honorable Minister, with this revolution of the tools of production taking place, is opening a new world order. A world in which trade relations are being reshaped, with multilateral institutions like the World Trade Organization now fully being undermined. It goes without saying that countries, for an example like Israel, with the full support of the United States, has lived all its existence since 1948 with the utter disregard of UN resolutions regarding its genocidal activities against Palestinians. But its recent genocidal campaign in Gaza is the worst yet, displacing millions, killing over 50 million, leaving hundreds of thousands missing or injured. The war campaign is the culmination of the total disregard of international law, human rights, and multilateral institutions. Similarly, the United States has ignored UN reports and recommendations and international law on many of its war campaigns that results in crimes against humanity, like the invasion of Iraq, Afghanistan, and the destruction of Libya, alongside utter disregard of our own continental conflicts. In the Eastern DRC, the economic, which is part of the Great Lakes region, one wonders about the role of the African Union, our own multilateral organization. Perhaps even its general inability to hold the actions of member states accountable. In the Sahel region, ECOWAS's rather unfortunate response to the political manifestations, for instance in Burkina Faso, which has launched a serious fight to secure total independence from those racists of France. Our own continental unity, coherence, is continuing to unravel. Nevertheless, for 35 years, the United States, Comrade Minister, was the single superpower in the world, matched by no one after the collapse of the USSR. At the turn of the century, the 21st century, developed countries in the world were limited to the former colonial forces, plus Russia. The rest of the world, from East Asia to the Indian subcontinent, from Africa to Latin America, were outside the capitalist industrial modernity or simply its mineral base component. But let us go back. Let us recall the proper ideas. You will remember that in the 1970s, it was Mao Zedong, in conversation with Kenneth Kaunda, who argued for a different international relations system, reorganized outside the West-East Cold War idea. He introduced the idea of the three-world theory. Mao argued that the international relations system has three contradictory economic centers or global provinces. In this theory, the first world included the then two superpowers, the United States and the USSR, with Europe and Japan and Canada, as well as Australia. The third world, and that was the second world. The third world comprised of Africa, China, East Asia, the Indian subcontinent, the Caribbean, and Latin America. Today, Mao's China is fully fledged superpower in pure industrial, military, and cultural terms. It is part of the richest countries in the world, the greatest threat facing the United States today. It is part of the rich countries together with East Asian tigers over the last 35 years. India and Brazil are well on their path to become developed countries. In the Middle East, if we exclude African Arab countries and those who were targets of the 21st century US imperialist wars, like Afghanistan, Iraq, Russia, half of that region is argumentatively part of the developed world. If we consider Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, we in the continent cannot point to a single country amongst us with even the prospect of scientific and industrial power. We are at the bottom, and this bottom is not explicable, it's inexplicable. Why? Haunted by, amongst other things, the tragic contradiction related to the fact that we are the most minerally rich continent in the world. So how do we make sense of this contradiction? It is important to underscore this because if we do not answer this contradiction, we are unable to break through from over half a century of underdevelopment. Our conversation is taking place in the radical change that is the industrial civilization in the international system, with the threats to environment standing at its center. The trade wars that are started by the United States signifies the United States' end, or the end of the US's own hegemony in the world as a single superpower for 35 years. But it marks the beginning of a multipolar world. However, what shall be Africa's place in the new changing global system? We will not be able to change the position of our permanent juniority, the condition of being at the bottom of the world, or in a place that Achille Mbembe calls necropolity. I heard the minister earlier speaking about the self-perpetuating economy of coffins. Necropolitics relates to a place of death, a place of ghosts, the place that is at the center of which is those trip, the death drive, self-sabotage, self-mutilation, self-hate, and self-destruction. Our generation must ask the crucial question: how do we turn the leaf? It seems to me that there are three paths that are in front of us in this age of monsters. One is that we will continue in the path of self-mutilation characterized by disunity, war, corruption, and underdevelopment. Two, we will get dismembered. We will get dismembered. This is very important. We are going to be dismembered into supporting different superpowers in the world. when the trade negotiations with the United States took place over the last 2 weeks, what happened? Africa was not one. Zimbabwe went to negotiate on its own. Rwanda went to negotiate on its own. We could not be united. This is similar, if you remember, to the occurrence of the Berlin Conference, where the then colonial powers drafted these borders that you now proudly defend today as your own borders. The border of Malawi and Mozambique, the border of Malawi and Zambia, the border of South Africa and Namibia. Africans, you Africans, were never consulted as to whether these should be your borders. What that conference did, which was called the Berlin Conference, it can repeat itself, where superpowers gather elsewhere and divide Africa amongst each other because of Africa's inability to unite and come to the international table as a unit. In our age, we will see others take the side of China, whilst others go to the US, and then others go to Europe, and others go to Russia in the coming trade confrontations that may as well become a world fully blown military confrontation. You will remember tonight, in the coming months, the final path lies in the revival of the dreams of our founders, from Nkrumah, Nyerere and Kaunda, with their ideas of Pan-Africanism, at the center of which is Africa's self-determination and Africa's unity that always presents itself in the world as a united force. You think in the head of Donald Trump there is a Lesotho and a Malawi? You seriously think in that racist, incoherent psychopath of a head there is Egypt that is different to South Africa? Trump sees this continent as a single country with people who cannot run their own affairs. But in the ideas of our founding fathers, at the beginning of independence was a resounding call that we must never allow Africa again to be divided. The ideas of Africa's renaissance, advocated by Auntie Diop and later by Mbeki, Kagame and others, at the center of which is African reliance, Africa solving its own problems without the guidance of Europeans. Here we have arrived at Vitumbiko and his ask tonight. He's asking us to raise a movement, a continental movement of people over politics. To speak to the content of this idea, allow me to take a detour to the word of scripture. You will recall that the first murder in the Bible occurred between twins who were born and came from the same womb. You will recall when Cain killed Abel, God then asked him, "Where is your brother?" To which Cain answered, "I am not my brother's keeper." Incidentally, when someone has committed an act of hatred, an act of envy, an act of murder, they feel unaccountable for the humanity of their other. Incidentally, the colonial racist project was driven by hate. White people never felt accountable to the humanity of black people. We must ask, have we not replicated this hatred amongst each other? Have we over the years not also treated ourselves with the same hatred that the colonizers treated us? Neglected and rejected, that we are not finding each other, that we feel unaccountable for the humanity of each other. We feel unaccountable for our children's education. We feel unaccountable for the public infrastructure, for the infrastructure of our hospitals, of our water. Nobody feels accountable to keep the institutions like the schools, like the clinic. It's always someone else's responsibility to keep those institutions in a dignified state and not our responsibility. If you will permit me one last time, let's return to the word of scripture. Those of us who went to Sunday school will remember an incident where Jesus says he had to return to Jerusalem, and there he will suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests and the teachers of the law, and that he will have to be killed. Comrade Minister, you'll remember that Peter took him aside. We are told he rebuked Jesus, saying, stop speaking like that. Nothing like that is going to happen. Incidentally, it is there where Jesus calls Peter Satan. But after that, he returned to the disciples and said something I think will help us unpack Vitumbiko's philosophy. We are told, then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone amongst you wants to be my disciple, you must deny yourself, carry your cross, and follow me. We may begin to say to each other, have we not over the past years neglected to take our own cross? This is a very important analogy. Instead of taking our own cross, we began to think the cross that we put on the ballot paper means surrendering responsibility to build our own world. We surrendered the responsibility to build our communities, to build our families, to educate our children, totally to politicians. We began to elevate politics above everything else, including above the God that we pray on Sundays. We began to abandon the idea that people are their own liberators. We began to cultivate a culture of dependency instead of self-sufficiency. In so doing, we stood on the side and kept waiting for politics to change our world. We began to elevate this politics, but then things got worse and worse, year by year, decade after decade, because we kept waiting for a politician to solve our problems. Is it not our fault that we relegated our lives and invested all of our freedom into one principle called politics? Politics is driven by a specific logic. But this principle, although fully correct, it is nonetheless limited, and we use this principle to navigate life. All of life, we miss the point. Freedom, liberation cannot be provided by politics only. Politics is merely the means of governance. The power, though, of that governance to succeed always depends on the people. So what is politics? It is creating the possibility for people to own their lives, for people to run their lives, for people to govern themselves, their economy, their schools, their health care. You don't take that responsibility from them. Let us put it differently. We may have abandoned a politics that made decolonization possible, a politics where the people are the liberators. When we do not take up the cross and relegate it to politicians, what do politicians do? Over time, they think they are the messiahs. They grow arrogant. They become untouchable because we have relegated the responsibility to live from them. We have relegated, we even ask permission from them to see each other. We have allowed them to become the Alpha and Omega. Finally, they began to serve themselves. They forgot to serve the people. They began to become in that parasitic culture of get rich quick and go to Europe. They began to take bribes. They began to be lazy. When the leader of Burkina Faso says, if you want to make money, please don't join politics. Go into business. But you know why they won't go to business? Frantz Fanon explains the basic economic problem of the African continent. Africa does not have a bourgeoisie. Africa does not have capitalists, because capitalists, it's not people who facilitate the wealth on behalf of Europeans. At the center of the bourgeoisie is the capacity to be innovative. There are people there in my country. I want to give you an example. Listen very carefully. What is a bourgeoisie? A bourgeoisie is an inventor. If we do not insist on the bourgeois capitalist definition, at the center of which is an innovation, there are people here in the continent, they say they are rich. And then when you ask them, how do you make your money? You and I know why Mark Zuckerberg is rich. He's got Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. That is his invention. That is his product. We know why the owners like Steve Jobs, who has died, why was Steve Jobs rich? He invented the iPhone. We know why that philanthropist called, who owns Microsoft, Bill Gates. We know why Bill Gates is rich. He invented Microsoft. Now go all over here in Malawi, ask all rich people, what did you invent? What's your contribution? Why are you rich? There is a president there in South Africa called Ramaphosa. He is also very rich. But minister, Ramaphosa's riches come out of owning McDonald's. But Ramaphosa did not invent a burger. He's got shares in McDonald's. He's got shares in this mine and that mine that are ultimately just taking minerals from our continent to support the industrial projects of Europe and America. It's time we ask these people who are rich, maybe they must start telling us, you are rich because of bribes from Europe. And what do you do in return is to suppress the African black inventors, is to support the people that are going to invent the products that will make us not depend on Europe. Very, very important. Some of them are rich out of tithes and offerings. There is someone here in Malawi who is wanted in South Africa. I'm going to ask the minister to help me go past that house of that person and just tell him, there are questions for you there in South Africa that you must come answer. Whether you are a pastor or a politician, you don't have the right to steal from the poor. Not in the name of God, not in the name of our people. Now, this is what always has been at the center of Pan-African politics and the African Renaissance. The true measure of freedom is that the people are their own liberators. We don't teach that anymore, because if you started teaching these young people that they are their own liberators, they will do things for themselves that render politicians irrelevant. So we teach them that a politician will come to solve your problems. I'm saying that at the center of the Christian faith is a message that you must take your cross. Hey, if Jesus Christ comes back today, I suspect they're going to kill him again. Because these people are scared of the truth. Because there's no Jesus who's going to tell you he's going to solve your unemployment. Jesus is going to say, carry your cross as we go together to solve the problems of our people. Palace politics are made of factions and the maneuvers of power, and openly driven or dominated by ambition and personal reward. In this system, it is almost impossible to build a selfless cadre. Not even strict political education can achieve that. A new generation of African leaders must come out of community service, not political parties, where they serve communities in all aspects of their lives without expectation of personal reward. This is the new cadre that will be able to selflessly lead our people. Because in community service, there is no salary. In community service, there are no contracts. In community service, there are no bribes. It is just you and our people. If we have produced those activists who have shown their determination over years to have served communities selflessly, then we can elect them to become presidents, because we know the same way they selflessly served communities, they will selflessly serve Malawi. today, one has to almost clarify. Merci. One almost has to clarify. When we say African unity, it does not mean allowing corrupt criminals to freely roam the continent, engaging in human trafficking, using religion or God to prey on the vulnerable, criminals who move around with forged passports to set up networks of drug dealing to destroy the future of the young people of this continent. We do not mean Africa eliminating borders to give advantage to criminals and lazy politicians who choose to fight, who do not choose to fix their countries, who do not choose to fight dictatorship, corrupt government officials, and securitocrats. African unity is not allowing a person to steal from Malawi, run to Tanzania, because he knows when he gets to Tanzania, they won't find them. African unity means documenting all of us, so that there is no way that you can steal in Johannesburg and go to Luanda without a trace. It means knowing all of us in a documented, proper system. Who are you? Where do you live? What are your skills? What's your contribution in society? We must unite against those who rape our continent together with the world powers and multinational corporations. We must unite against those who use this continent for criminal activities. Comrade Minister, I propose that at the center of people above politics is the return of community service. It is the return of the school governing bodies, of parents who get involved in the education of their children. I propose that the philosophy of people above politics is about young people appreciating that they must initiate cultural organizations and initiatives in music, in fine arts, in film, in drama, as well as in sports, to fight against alcohol and drug abuse. I propose that people above politics is returning to the debating societies where young, intelligent Africans debate amongst each other, and at the end of the day, the best argument wins. People above politics means we must not wait for the African Union to unite the continent. It means constituting associations across the board, across the borders, to constitute a common agenda to fight against the Donald Trumps of this world, to fight against the advantage that China is taking against us. I propose that we must form African Renaissance clubs and revive the ideas of the founding fathers of African independence. Hold each other accountable. Out of that process, Comrade Minister, will come out the best of the best. And we must be so fearless, we must be so brave that we refuse to be led by the laziest amongst us. We must refuse to be led by the dumbest amongst us. We must refuse to be led by those who hate innovation, by those who hate brilliant minds of students who are prepared to question power no matter the circumstances. We must refuse to be divided. There is nothing Africa is going to achieve in this new global balance of power if we act in a divided way. We must appeal from Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Madagascar. We must hold Kagame in relation to the DRC and Tshisekedi and say to them, find a room, stop and silence the guns, unite the African continent and face the world together as responsible leadership. We must challenge ECOWAS that the exclusion of Burkina Faso from the Western African community is not a solution when Burkina Faso is fighting for independence from colonial France. All of West Africa must cut ties with France. We must challenge Museveni. We must challenge all our leaders from these African Renaissance clubs based on cultural excellence, based on sports excellence, based on uniting on the principles of self-reliance, self-determination, self-love. We must refuse for hate to win in the African continent. All of you here on Sunday, you will be closing your eyes, praying a God you cannot see. And when you open your eyes, hate the man and woman that is created by the God that you don't see. You've got the guts to hate, but pray. Hatred has taken us too long. We have to build an Africa that loves itself. We need to build an Africa that knows how to define its best interest. In conclusion, I want to challenge you as the students of Malawi. Never give up on Malawi. Never give up on your country. Never give up on the land of your mothers and fathers. There is nobody coming to solve Malawi's food problems. If you want a person that is going to expand manufacturing with jobs in Malawi, look on your side. That is your next boss. That is next industrial captain. If you cannot see in this very room the future industrial leaders of Malawi, then you hate Malawi. Right next to you is standing a person with the solution for agricultural success, with the solution to use the rare earth minerals, to localize them and turn them into the digital equipment that we keep transporting from Europe. Next to you is the person that is going to give us an African car. Next to you is the person that is going to give us African-made cell phones. Next to you is the person that is going to resolve all the industrial problems of this continent. Your duty tonight, and this is my fundamental message, never destroy that person next to you. Never speak hate to this person next to you. Never ever discourage the person standing next to you now. Hold their hand, propel them to the best of their capacity. Tell them, we can change Malawi, we can change the lives of our people, not tomorrow, but today. Amandla!